Welcome to Science Sci-Fi, connecting the public to science and technology through storytelling. My name is Ronnie Friedheim. I'm a science fiction writer and an IT professional. Today we have a special guest, Aubrey de Grey. He's being a PhD, a biomedical gerontologist. Hopefully I pronounced it correctly. I've been following him for about 20 years. His work, mostly what he's doing is trying to advocate and help medical science to make us to a point that we have therapies to prevent death from age-related issues. So the microphone is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Ron. Thank you for having me on your show. And I guess I should probably start by pointing out that even though quite a lot of people like yourself who are advocates and have interest in this area have links to science fiction, whether they're science fiction writers or enthusiasts or whatever, nevertheless, that doesn't make what I'm talking about science fiction. It's like, basically, if one is the kind of person who aims high and who understands the potential for future technology to improve the human condition, then perhaps that is the kind of thing that makes one interested in science fiction. But of course, it's not science fiction itself. The area that I focus on these days really falls into two parts. One part, which you quite rightly mentioned a moment ago, which is that I spend a lot of my time community building, advocating generally, educating people, raising the quality of understanding and debate about this whole area of bringing aging under comprehensive medical control. And I do that because at the end of the day, the people who are at the bench and in the clinic trying to actually implement it are unable to do that, at least unable to do it at the rate that we would like, unless they have public support. So the support of the public, and that means every kind of public. It means wealthy people, it means governments, it means the general public. That is absolutely instrumental. Of course, also, the other reason why I do a lot of advocacy, a lot of community building, is in order to bring people into the field to actually make contributions with their time. Whether it's scientists going into the most valuable and most important research areas, whether it's philanthropists or investors bringing in financial support, whether it's journalists, people who can bring things to another audience, people like yourself, in fact, like what you're doing right now. But of course, the reason I'm able to do all that is because I started out making contributions to the science itself. The main thing I'm known for in the research field is that 20 odd years ago, I brought forward for the first time the idea that reversing aging could be easier than slowing it down. So said like that, it sounds like, how can that possibly be true? Surely, if you've got this juggernaut going along, slowing it down is the first thing you do, and you only think about sending it into reverse after you've got really good at slowing it down. But I was able to argue successfully in the end, though it took about 10 years, that no, that's not true. That actually the thing is that the way that we would reverse aging is not by reversing the processes of aging, but rather by repairing the consequences before those consequences get out of control. So this is best understood as preventative maintenance, as something very similar to what we do with simple man-made machines like cars or airplanes or whatever, that we, build them to last a certain amount of time, what you might think of as their warranty period, and that's pretty much how long they last, if we only just treat them fairly well. But we, of course, know that a small proportion of the machines that we build, for whatever reason, just because their owners fell in love with them or whatever, they have lasted far beyond the amount of time that they were designed to last. For example, we have cars now that are 100 years old or more, And those cars were built to last 10 or 15 years, but here they are working every bit as well as when they were built. And if you'd asked someone 100 years ago who was building such a car whether there was the slightest chance that that car would last 100 years, they'd have laughed at you. They'd have said, no way in the world. But now, if you ask someone who owns a 100-year-old car and you ask them, is it going to last another 100 years? They'll say, well, sure, why not? Because we just have to carry on doing the same thing every so often. Comprehensive, periodic, preventative maintenance. That's all it is. You know, getting rid of the rust periodically before the doors fall off and similar things. So we have to ask, is this analogy between simple man-made machines and living organisms like you and me, is this analogy valid? And there are people who say, there are lots of people who say, no, it's not valid, but they're wrong. So I'm going to go through for a moment a couple of the two main reasons why people say it's not valid and why those reasons are wrong. The first one is complexity. People just say, well, no, you know, I mean, the human body is a billion times more complicated than any man-made machine. And it's not just the sheer complexity itself, it's how much we understand about the structure and function and mechanics of the machine. We know so little about biology. All of those things are true, but they are just differences of degree. And in particular, the business of how little we know about how the body works is a bit of a straw man, it's a bit of a distraction. Because the whole point about preventative maintenance is that you don't actually need to know how the damage that the machine accumulates is actually happening. An engineer, a car mechanic, does not need to understand anything about the chemistry of rusting in order to understand that rust is bad for the car, and if you get rid of it every so often, you can keep the car going. And it's the same with all the other types of damage that the car accumulates that are initially harmless because the car is built to tolerate a certain amount of them, but which eventually become problematic when you have too much. So that's just the same. The other thing that people often say that they argue means that this is not a valid analogy is that the human body has a whole bunch of automatic, inbuilt, self-repair machinery. There are loads of types of molecular and cellular change that happen as side effects of the body's normal operation of our metabolism, and that the body simply repairs at once as soon as they occur. So those things do not accumulate. And people often think, simplistically, that because we don't get sick when we're young, in other words, the pathologies of late life are only seen in late life, that there is some kind of switch that happens, that we've got the ability to repair the damage that happens during early adulthood, and then suddenly that ceases to be true, and damage starts to accumulate because we cease to be able to repair the damage that we used to be able to repair. And that's kind of true, but it begs the question, why? What is the switch? How does that change? And the real answer to that question is simply that the automatic inbuilt repair machinery that we already have, that's genetically built in, is not comprehensive, even initially. In other words, there are some types of molecular and cellular change to the body that are brought about by metabolism and that are not repaired, even in youth. So they do accumulate, whether it's waste products, whether it's mutations, whether it's cells dying and not being replaced by cell division, various types of damage. And these things, because they are not repaired even in youth, they are the clock, so to speak. They are the thing that eventually causes our previously perfectly good damage repair mechanisms for other things to work less and less well. Same as everything in the body works less and less well late in life. So this really is a genuinely very good analogy, the analogy between living organisms and simple man-made machines. It underpins why we can say that preventative maintenance is the way to go. When I first started putting this forward in the early 2000s, it was extremely alien to everybody in the mainstream community. Almost nobody understood a word that I was saying. But over the years, I was able to carry on, pressing this idea and presenting it to people and answering their concerns and complaints and reservations and doubts. And by a decade ago, like 2013 was the real kicker, when a group of my colleagues, very credentialed, very mainstream people, put out a paper that was essentially just a restatement of what I had said a decade before that. And the time was right. Everyone was ready. They'd seen all of this and they understood, yeah, this is the way to go. So now I never have to justify the damage repair approach to my colleagues in the field. All right, so that's basically how I got going. But of course, I have a foundation. I have an organization that is focused on actually implementing all of this. And we're not the only people by any means. As the concept has become more mainstream, more and more entities, both non-profit and for-profit, have emerged that are doing aspects of this. But I've always known and focused on the fact that this is a divide and conquer strategy. In other words, we have only any chance of really delivering the real, the jackpot here, the really substantial postponement of the health problems of late life, if we get all of the various types of damage repair therapies that I've been propounding, if we get them all working reasonably well. We don't have to get any of them working absolutely 100% perfectly, but we have to get them all working fairly well. And some of them, inevitably, are more tricky than others. So some of them are a lot further along. Some of them are in clinical trials already, and some of them are certainly quite a few years away from clinical trials. What does that mean? What it means is that the things that are furthest along get the attention of people who have short-termist incentive structures. And that means the private sector, of course. Anybody who wants to make money wants to make it tomorrow. So they're focusing on the things that are furthest along, the lowest hanging fruit. But unfortunately, it's also true within academia, within mainstream academia that's funded by the government. Because there, the funding is never adequate. There's always a huge amount of dog-eat-dog competition for that funding. And the way that the people who make their decisions on who gets money and who doesn't is by the wrong criteria, to be honest. But you can't change it, because they do it in a way that, they feel they can justify. Essentially, it comes down to feasibility, as they see it. It comes down to the publication record of the researchers, especially in high-profile journals. And that's a real problem, because however well you do an experiment, if the experiment achieves some success, some big breakthrough, you'll get it published somewhere high profile. But if it doesn't, you won't. You might have difficulty publishing it at all. This is what's called a negative result. And this is a tragedy, because negative results are just as important for the progression of knowledge as positive results are. But still, they get enormously underpublished. So I have, for the past a long time now, 15 years, set up my succession of organizations in a manner that sidesteps that problem. We are not funded by investors who want to make money back. We are also not funded by the government, by and large. Instead, we are funded by philanthropists, people who can make their own decisions. They do not need to, get any kind of reputational benefit from what we do or anything like that. All they have to do is feel that they're doing the right thing, which means all they have to do is trust me. And of course, when I say philanthropists here, one would normally think that I'm talking only about wealthy people, but by no means is that the case. Anyone, even someone who's going to contribute $10 a month or $100 a month, there are a lot more of those people than there are people who can give us, $100,000 a month, right? So it all adds up. And I am extraordinarily grateful to the people who have the vision to appreciate my vision and to support the work that I am getting done. So I should probably talk about some of the work that I am getting done. On the advocacy side, which I spoke about a little while ago, I am funding a number of groups that are doing various types of advocacy. Some of them are educational. For example, there's a group called Afro Longevity, which is bringing the entire, the longevity concept and community and campaign and crusade to a whole new continent that's been very poorly exposed to it in the past. It's a wonderful organization run by two amazing people, one from South Africa, one from Nigeria. And, they're just getting going. But what little support I am in a position to provide, I am very proud to be doing so because I really believe that this has enormous potential. Last year, actually 6 months ago, I guess, I helped to launch another initiative in the West called Less Death, which is all about bringing people into the field and positioning them and educating them to be able to make a contribution. Typically, this is targeted towards people who already have a track record of one sort or another, whether they're entrepreneurs or journalists or whatever, and who are enthusiastic about contributing to the mission, but who are unclear about how they could contribute. So the idea of this is to bring such people together, to form alliances, also, of course, to educate them in those areas where they don't know enough. And the first iteration of this happened a few months ago. It was extraordinarily successful. The next iteration is recruiting students right now. So please go to lessdeath.org and have a look. I am no longer having to support it financially because other people are doing so, which suits me fine. But yes, it's one of the most important things going on right now. And then on the more kind of qua advocacy side of things, one of the things I'm supporting in the new foundation, LEV Foundation, is a lobbying group called A4LI, Alliance for Longevity Initiatives, which is focused specifically on moving the needle of opinion in Congress with regard to using taxpayers' money to hasten the defeat of aging. And then the other group I'm supporting is called the Healthspan Action Coalition. This is a group bringing together, well, it's very much a coalition, it's bringing together a great many different organizations across biomedical research, but of course with a focus on the medical problems that predominantly affect the elderly. And the idea here is to speak very directly to the general public, to educate people to understand that the medical control of aging is coming and that we have the capacity to make it come sooner rather than later. So that's all the stuff I'm doing in the advocacy space. In the research space, I should probably highlight the reason why I have chosen to call our new foundation the Longevity Escape Velocity Foundation, LEV Foundation. LEV, Longevity Escape Velocity, is a term that I coined nearly 20 years ago, and it is the concept of postponing the health problems of late life faster than time is passing, such that with successively more sophisticated interventions, we can repeatedly rejuvenate the same people over and over again, so as to prevent them from ever getting to be biologically old enough to be sick, however chronologically old they are. So this is a little bit of a difference from the situation with cars or airplanes or whatever, in the sense that we understand cars and airplanes and so on well enough that we can already do truly 100% comprehensive preventative maintenance on them. But we will only bootstrap our way to that point in the case of human beings. We will start out by something that is fairly good and maybe give us an extra 20 years of healthy life, but we will use those 20 years that we have essentially bought, right? We will use those years to improve the therapies so that we can rejuvenate the same people, even though the problem has become inherently more difficult because of the imperfections in the therapies that we started out with, the first generation therapies. So this concept of longevity escape velocity, as I say, it's something that I've been talking about for a long time, and it needs the support, the impetus that comes from someone like me, a professional heretic, because that's where rejuvenation was, damage repair 20 years ago, or even 15 years ago. It needed somebody who could be, who was able to, articulate, but also withstand the pressure of saying things that most of the mainstream were running away from. Now we're in the position where the mainstream is not running away from rejuvenation at all. There are companies and conferences and God knows what named rejuvenation, what used to be a word that was reserved for cosmetics. So that's all great. But the concept of longevity escape velocity is still a bridge too far for most academics, for most mainstream people. So it needs me to be highlighting it and focusing on it and taking it forward. And in terms of actual research, the way that we are doing this, our flagship project, is a really large-scale mouse study that will be a rolling study with cohorts every 8 months maybe. The first cohort will be starting in January, just a month from now. And the goal here is to identify combinations of rejuvenation interventions in mice that can be applied to those mice when they're already in middle age or older, so maybe 18 months for a mouse strain that typically lives maybe 2.5 years, and to double or more their remaining lifespan. So to give an extra year of life to animals that would typically be only going to be living another year. The idea here is that, first of all, we want to start late in life with mice that have not had anything done to them, whether genetic or dietary or pharmacological until that time, because that's similar to what we would want to do with people. And we will do lots of different things because we understand that we've got to fix lots of different types of damage. So this study is now beginning with 4 different interventions. The details are still being, the fine details are still being ironed out, so I'll be announcing all of that very soon, probably the next week or two. But the goal here, of course, is to achieve this concept, which I have also given a name to. I call it robust mouse rejuvenation. And, the sooner we do that, the better. We don't know whether these first 4 interventions are going to do it. Of course, we are applying subsets of them in case some of them have antagonistic interactions. But as time goes on, we will do further cohorts with different interventions, and we will learn as we go. So that's the main project. Let's call it full throttle to robust mouse rejuvenation. That's the flagship project of LEV Foundation. I guess I've probably talked enough.
Okay, typically we are almost run out of time. I don't know if you question, but I think the main question is how can people engage with you, and if they can find a LEV or longevity velocity. Yeah,
sure,
so
the foundation has a website, LEV Foundation, so levf.org, and our research is described there. It's described only in rather brief terms as of right, because we only just got going, but over the next month or two there will be a good deal of further expansion of what's written there. And of course there's a nice shiny donate page. We are very much in need of ramping this up as fast as we can to do more and more studies of this nature. And let's face it, mouse experiments are expensive, mouse lifespan experiments are very expensive. So any support that anybody wants to give would be enormously valuable.
Yeah, my daughter right now, she studies biomedical sciences. She's doing some experiments with mice, but not on longevity, more related to stress. It's one of the things that also helps.
Oh yeah,
helps. So thank you very much. I will post the links to the project that you are running and to the website that you're referring to for the viewers. And thank you very much. And if anybody wants to donate right now, just before Christmas, if they want to look at the utilitarianism side, have to help millions of people, that's one of the options.
And the last thing I should probably say is that if anybody has questions, they're very welcome to write to us. You can write to us from the website, the contact information, or you could just write to me directly, aubrey@levf.org, and you'll definitely get an answer.
Yeah. So thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure.
And I hope we can become younger soon.
That's the plan. Thanks so much, Ron.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.